And we are live. This is They Talk Funny, episode 11. I'm here with Peter J. Radomski, impresario, I'm not maestro of the Montreal comedy scene. And he's waving at the camera already, even though we're not on screen. So let's bring that up right away as soon as I figure out how to do that. There we are. Peter J. Radomski.
Hello. Do
Hello.
I wave again? Hi.
Yes.
First time caller, long time listener. I always wanted to say that.
This is actually episode 11. So I'm sorry it's taken so long to get you in here.
Oh, pish tosh.
Pish posh, pish tosh. Peter is, for those who are not familiar with Peter, Peter has been a long time member, supporter, producer on the Montreal comedy scene. He works mainly out of the Comedy Nest. He used to run the Drop the Gloves at Grumpy's. He also spent close to a year living in New York City doing stand-up there. And he, like all of us, are subject to quarantine here in Montreal. Hi, Peter. How are you doing?
Hi. I'm in quarantine. That's how I am. I'm good. I'm good. You know, I think like everyone else, you know, anxious and eager for things to return to normal. At the same time, trying to be as cautious as possible. So, but looking forward to seeing a number of friendly faces on the scene once things are back to normal.
Exactly. And if any of those friendly faces are watching, you can comment either on the YouTube comments or the Facebook comments, and we will be able to bring those comments in, such as this, which is a quick little bio about Peter. So he first tried stand up at the age of 11. So, so
yes, indeed.
What can you explain a little bit more about that history with the music teacher, or what brought you into doing stand up?
Certainly. What happened was my initial exposure to comedy was the Marx Brothers. That's my first memory of seeing something that I really enjoyed laughing at, and I wanted to be a Marx Brother, sort of. You know, I guess the way that a lot of kids, when they see a band on TV and they want to pick up a guitar or play drums or whatever. For me, it was I saw the Marx Brothers and I wanted my mom to, create more siblings so that I could have a comedy team. That didn't quite happen, but I didn't waste any time letting anyone know how much I liked the Marx Brothers, including my teachers in elementary school. And there's a particular teacher, a guy named Gary Lidner, who I'm still in touch with, who was in charge of the Christmas concert every year at the school. And I think he was also aware of how tone deaf I was as far as my singing went. And so he encouraged me instead to do a stand-up routine between some of the acts. So he, pulled me aside one day and said, "Why don't you write some stand-up?" And so I went up there and performed for the first time at the age of 11. Did a combination of some bar jokes, I guess you might call it, or dad jokes, kind of a thing. And but I knew well enough that you got to write your own material. So I came up with an observation, which I've thought of revisiting just for the sake of what would I do with it now. And it was an observation. Again, you're a kid. Your perspective of the world is limited. So I had made an observation about the socks that my mom bought me coming on little coat hangers and not having a closet to hang them up in, which I guess for an 11-year-old kid isn't bad. It's not profound, but it's not bad. I think I know better than to try and do it now. And
but you're still thinking about revisiting it, so it's all.
Yeah, it's like, well, what would I do with it now? You revisit it, all these years later, and you're like, well, what would you do with it? That teacher was also responsible for introducing me to the name Lenny Bruce. Which I don't know what that says about a teacher that he talks about Lenny Bruce in front of a 12-year-old, but he did. And
he waited a year. You were 11 and then 12.
Well, exactly. And then a year later, I went down to Sam the Record Man's and I bought my first comedy albums, which were Lenny Bruce albums, and didn't understand half of them because of the references. So that forced me to then go to the library, look up the references, re-listen to the album, then laugh because I got the references. But it set a whole path for me of, for one, falling in love with the brilliance of Lenny Bruce's observations, but also this idea of if you don't know something, look the damn thing up and learn. So it did me a lot of good. So I'll always be grateful to Gary Lidner for all of that.
That's great.
And the conversation ends on a lull. But
No, but it's great that you actually had a mentor of that sort at that age, which is it's impressive to somebody recognizing your desire and fostering it at that young an age. I mean,
oh yeah,
I still don't have support a lot of the time when it comes to wanting to do comedy. So that was a lie.
we're working on it. We're working on it.
So what was it that when did you actually move from just doing it at school things to your first live performance at, say, like an open mic or
That would be in CSHEP.
CJEP?
So yeah, so
CJEP,
about
for
eight.
those who are watching who are not in Quebec,
Right.
CJEP, Montreal high schools end at grade 11, and then you can either choose a 1 or 2 year program in a CJEP before going to university.
Yeah, it's generally a 2 or 3 year program. It's basically the equivalent of like it's sort of another year of high school / community college. It would be the best way to describe it. And then you go to university. And in any event, it was around then that I'd made some friends that kind of encouraged me to do this. And so I went up and I did the open mic at the Comedy Works a couple times. That was I don't think I was even aware of the Comedy Nest at the time, to be honest. But I knew about the Comedy Works open mic, which was on Mondays. And at the time, they had a show up, go up policy, where if you got there at around 6 or 6:30 or whenever it was, you had a spot. And the night could consist of 8 performers or 22 performers. And that would usually determine how much time you ended up getting as a result. So if there was 20 people on the show, everyone did 3 minutes, and if there was 8 people, everyone got five minutes, and the more seasoned acts would get 10 minutes, 12 minutes, or what have you. Yeah, so that's when I did it, and I was terrible. By all means, I was I was absolutely awful at it. I may still have a cassette or two from recordings I made from then. I haven't had the courage to either look for them or listen to them. I know they were terrible. I wasn't really honest on stage. It was just really bland kind of observational material. There was no real depth to any of the content. Just average, generic open micer crap that, the same kinds of observations that, you see dozens of people who dabble in it. Kind of your bucket. Like I mean, I'm sure you've seen this as well, Paul. There's no doubt you've seen this. There's a lot of people who dabble with comedy, and it's a bucket list thing. It's the cut up at the office. It's someone who the friends always tell them that they're very, very funny, and they'll go out and they'll perform, but they don't have a career goal in mind. It's just they wanted to get it out of their system, and that's all fine and well. That's great. That's part of what open mics are for. But
Claudio,
the material. Sorry,
Claudio Capri is watching. He just wanted to send some good vibes our way as well. I do have to say that one of some of my favorite performers, like I believe in stories and performers, was a woman who did it because it was on her bucket list, and she was utterly amazing. And one of the last performances she actually did was a breast cancer fundraiser, and she did 45 minutes in front of a crowd of like 400 people, which was amazing. It was just something that was inside her that didn't get a chance to come out. So there's people who do it for the bucket list to just do it once, and then there's people who do it for the bucket list because it's something they always wanted to do. I guess that's the clarifications.
Yeah, and there is always a portion of those people who then decide that once isn't enough, and they pursue this. This becomes a thing for them. But let's face it, and this doesn't just apply to bucket listers, but I think we can, if we're going to be honest with all of our materials, the first year or so, the content is never particularly good. and it's generally not the material you stick with for the rest of your, your career, or at least it shouldn't be. And a lot of times the observations are kind of banal, they're generic, and anyway, that's what I was doing. And I went through a couple of weeks where I bombed badly, talking like 6 or 8 weeks in a row, where I just, I didn't connect with the crowd at all. I was terrible. So I took 2 months off, but 2 months became 9 years, and then I came back to it.
It's also it's a lot of some people start young, but they don't know who they are. Some people start young and they find out very quickly who they are, which makes it easier to present it on stage. Is what I think. So I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit. What about your writing style? Like what writing habits did you kind of start with, and how have they evolved?
Well, the one thing I've always done is I've always carried a notepad and a pen with me everywhere I go. Once I started doing this, just in case I believe in the old adage of better to write down 10 ideas that are terrible than to lose one really amazing one. But as far as my style, I think, I mean, there's certainly a fair amount of self-deprecating stuff. There's a lot of kvetching as well. Things that annoy me, ththings that piss me off.
That's feels like a little holdover from Lenny Bruce.
What the word kvetch?
Well, yeah. that too, but yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'd say it would probably fall under those two categories. The stuff I tend to be more proud of, the stuff that I tend to enjoy doing more, is that kind of stuff. The stuff that the quirky stuff. I also like to challenge myself and try and address areas that have been done to death, but try and find a new spin on it. Like last summer, I came up with the idea of trying to write original dick jokes, just because we've all heard dozens of unoriginal dick jokes. And it was like, well, is there actually a new area you can go to with this, and try and make it funny? And so one of the things I did was I wrote about Diphalia, which, if you don't know what that is, look it up, kids. It's worth the Google image search alone. So.
Wow. And we actually, as soon as you mentioned Diphalia, we grew 3 viewers. So keep up with the big words that people will have to research.
I would hope the numbers would have doubled. That would have been more appropriate.
It's still climbing.
Hey.
If you are just tuning in, I'm Paul Ash. I'm talking with Peter J. Radomski. This is They Talk Funny. Please drop a comment, click a like on the video. Peter J. Radomski, that's his finger and his name. So if you are watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe for all the content that's there. Peter Bowen is saying, hey, what's up, guys? I think we're in the middle of an interview, Peter, but Peter Bowen.
I think so too. Oh, yeah. Yes. I was thrown by the first name.
Yeah, exactly. There's that's the other thing. How do you like, Paul is a fairly common name. How do you feel about how common Peter is? Does it?
I don't really put much thought into it. I just that's my name.
Okay. So. Understood. Sorry for the left field. So yeah, well, okay. You're always carrying a notebook and a pencil or pen. And so do you do most of your writing manually? Are you writing it out on paper, or have you gone further now and you do a lot more typing or using audio recording, like talking out a joke before you bring it to the stage?
I tend to do all those things. I'll more often, if I'm going to flesh out the joke, I'll tend to write it out on the computer, where I'll take the initial script of an idea that I have, a note or whatever, and I'll open up a page on my computer and type it out. And just because I like the ability to sort of to look at it and visualize it, but also having the screen, I can move it around. I can, move the structure around. Sometimes you find out that your punchline is actually your setup, or that a particular punchline will work better earlier, I tend to use a lot of tags in my jokes. So, I'll have one punch and then I'll have a few other punches that follow. Um, Writing it out on a computer allows me to sort of look at that. Having said that, when I deliver the material, I don't memorize the material per se. I try to keep it as fluid as possible. So I will have an idea of what I want to say. I know certain key phrases and keywords. I will make a point of making sure that they're there, but how I get to them is going to be different. So, and I may also play with the sequence as well, just because I feel that one great luxury we have with this kind of a pursuit is we're not punching a clock. We're not doing routine work. So why make it feel like that? And if you can change the sequence of the content, if you can make it a little more spontaneous, why not? It took me a long time to be comfortable doing that, and it took me a long time to get halfway decent at that. But now, when I deliver a joke, I'm talking about a joke that I know has been fleshed out and works, because the main place I'll flesh out the joke will be at open mics, where I'll try it out a bunch of times, and I record all my performances so I can go back and listen to the performance and try and determine what works best and what doesn't. Once I have an idea of what the key phrases are, those are the ones I make a point of keeping, and then um, I'm quite prepared to drop the stuff that doesn't work, which is always tough at first. But I mean, I think that's probably the big growing pain. Do you find that to be the case?
Uh,
Like when
yeah,
starting off, you'll come up with something, and it can be very difficult to let go of it.
I'm a victim of I see that it's funny. Like I have to keep the emotive context when I'm delivering a joke, so I have to kind of still believe it's funny. And there's a lot of times I'll believe something's funny, and I think if I believe something's funny, I'm going to reach somebody in the audience who will believe it's funny. And I will sometimes leave stuff in my set a little too long when it should have been weeded out by audience reaction earlier. At the same time, I'm very much against writing for the lowest common denominator. I believe I want to elevate the audience a little bit if I can make them think a little bit and think a little bit stronger, or make them pay attention to me a bit more by adding in uh, uh, something that will resonate in a higher level with them. But at the same time, I risk losing people doing so.
Mhm.
Uh, Sorry, that
I
was
think
a
I think that's an ego thing we all have. I think especially if you're particularly proud of a phrase or a line, you're like, this should work. And then
yeah.
when it doesn't, there's that determination to try and keep doing it. But yeah,
I, I've
I mean,
I've learned that if I have something like that, I try to put it in as a tag or just a pre-hit to the main part of the joke. Um, Example being the throwaway line I referenced the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the bus seat joke,
mm,
where I talk about kids walking in wearing a knapsack that looks like they're turtles trying to evolve, and then I just act out going pizza pizza, which is from the first live action Turtles movie, which is
mm,
so old and so geeky, but there's when an audience member recognizes it, I'll get that bark of laughter. And it doesn't slow up the joke much just doing it, but I know that it's going to resonate with some people, but unfortunately, just a small percentage. But
yeah,
you actually you write very intelligent humor for the most part. It's everyone has uh their I won't say shit jokes, but their take as well. But For the most part, you like to reference things that is not common. Like you have an encyclopedic knowledge of music from the 1920s and 30s that you're not afraid to drop into a joke. So what how do you reconcile that with with being able to communicate well with the audience?
You know, I mean, I'm trying to think of a time when I did that. I've done that on occasion, among other things. But I've it's funny. It's always a compliment to hear it, and I've had a lot of comedians, you know, including yourself, describe my writing as being intelligent. I'm always flattered, but I'm always confused because it frightens me if I'm considered to be intelligent. You know, I know my limitations. And when people really get to know me, they get to realize that I'm actually not that bright. And when if I'm considered intelligent, I'm like, well, you know, that explains so much about COVID and everything else that's going on right now and why we're fucked as a species. If I'm considered intelligent, I'm surprised we made it this far. Um, you know, I would genuinely disagree. You know, like I said, once you really get to talk to me, you realize this guy's not that bright. I think what I really have going for me is I have a good memory for nonsense and useless information.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have maybe an above average vocabulary, maybe. Uh, and I think combining those two things, I might come across as being more intelligent. But um, but otherwise, it's a frightening thought. There's a comment here, a question from
Yes,
Davis
there's a
Angleton.
part two. So
Yes.
Monica Hamburg put this as a question from Davis Angleton. So part one,
Yeah.
as a fellow observer of human nature and the intricacies, I really appreciate your commitment to praxeology and spooling that into humor. Part
Oh
two is, do
God.
you ever wonder if you may be smarter than most other people? I find myself with that inner conflict and having to work on being more generous. Now, Davis Angleton, was he not a character in the short film that you did with Monica? Is that
Yes. Yeah,
yeah?
that was the film we did called More Funding Needed, which you can
Which
see
is
at
available Vimeo.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
on Vimeo at Forest Hills Productions, which is the so slash Forest Hills Productions. You can see this film, and Davis Angleton is a character we came up with. She came up with the name. Full credit to that. Um, and the it's a character that is sort of a composite of every person you've ever seen that attends a Q&A and makes the questions all about themselves. And this is something you see at Fantasia, which is that art and
it's the largest Asian film festival, or
yes,
in North America, which is
yeah,
happens in Montreal, which isn't
every
happening this
summer.
year.
Not
Yeah.
happening this year, no. Um, but that has almost every film they have there. Whenever they can, they bring you know, the director or someone who was involved in the movie for the premieres at least. And there's always a Q&A. And at those Q&As, you get these people who come in and I mean, we see it all the time. We see these people who, again, they're not there to ask a question. They're there to show you how intelligent they are, and almost to say, I asked a question, but not because I wanted to learn something, but to have a moment with the person who made the movie. So I'm going to ask this. You know, I'm going to make this statement, not a question. Anyway, Davis is based on those kinds of people who do that and make everyone roll their eyes when they start speaking.
And in the short film, it was actually played by your brother, Theo.
Yes, who is a big fan of Fantasia, and the motivation he was given for the part was channel all your worst experiences from Fantasia into the reading of these lines, and that's what he did. He just took and he took off with it. He did a fantastic job, and I don't just say that for the DNA factor. I say that because that's one of the things that a lot of people said they liked about the movie was they really liked his character. I mean, people have liked the movie too, which is nice. But his performance is particularly fun.
And the dedication for the facial hair as well. So it's
Yes, yes,
Claudio mentions that it's a great film, and I believe Claudio was he was in the film as an extra.
yes. He's actually in the same scene with Davis as one of the audience members who rolls their eyes with contempt
And he's
once
mentioning,
Davis starts speaking.
yeah, that at Fantasia happens at the Concordia University here in Montreal.
Yes.
Uh, So, is there any techniques that you're using in your writing? I mean, you obviously you said you when you flesh it out, you move it to the computer so you can move lines around to re-examine it. You listen to your recordings. Do you use mind maps at all? I know that because I had the pleasure of sitting in with you. You use writing groups on occasion just to bounce ideas back and forth. Um, is there any other techniques that you use in your writing?
Mostly, I would say it's really taking it out on stage as much as possible before I'm really happy with its structure. I'll take it to as many different open mics as possible, and I'll toy around with the delivery. I'll toy around with where I put it in the set, either beginning of the set, middle of the set, near the end of the set. I don't mean the immediate beginning because I always start with something tried and true, and then I'll just I'll try. Like I said, it's mostly about the audience reaction. I find that seems to be the best judge. Try it out, keep it loose, be open to adding some ideas when you're delivering it, and then it's actually watching the damn performances with a critical eye and trying to figure out why something does or doesn't work. But then I'd say, yeah, I think the best thing you can do is be prepared to throw out the stuff and being ready to discard things as much as I might like them. There's some stuff that just, yeah, the audience is just not on board, or it's just not it's not of the time, or it's just not it's just not that good. Sometimes it's also, I mean, one other thing I try to do in the writing process is, if an idea comes to me too quickly, I tend not to do it. You know, there's certain jokes that you know that are going to be done by 5,000 other comedians in different cities. It's almost like a franchise. And if you come up with a particular observation and it comes up to you too easily, there's a good chance there's someone in Cincinnati and in Minnesota, and in Vancouver and in LA all doing the same shitty joke. So why do it? Try to have an original point of view.
Mm.
But I mean, yeah, it's mainly just trying to hit the stage as much as possible. I found that seems to be the best thing to do to develop the joke.
Now, one of the things you sort of alluded to is the fact that you let the audience be the judge. Do you How do you deal with audiences? Because you're obviously you're not doing this for the weekend sets. You're doing this on open mics. If you're comparing that to say like a Comedy Nest open mic compared to doing it at Grumpy's or say Burritoville or those open mics, how do you like? Do you take the audience or the location into consideration when you're listening back and evaluating how well it works with an audience, or?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think you always have to consider the audience you're dealing with, right? Certain rooms, I mean, some of the rooms you mentioned just now. Uh, maybe it's just me, but I mean, I'm sure you feel. I imagine you feel the same way. There seems to be a difference between an audience that is paid to see a show versus an audience that's just there. The types of open mics where it's a satellite room. It's not a comedy venue. It's a bar or a restaurant that happens to have a comedy show that night. And if you're doing an open mic there and there isn't a set fee, the audience tends not to be I find they don't seem to be as invested into the show as people who've paid to see the show. In some cases they'll even see the performers as an affront. I'm here to drink. What are you doing on stage? I think of course you have to factor that into to the value of the joke. If a joke doesn't do as well, but you also have to adapt your delivery, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the same way that you adapt your delivery of a tried and true joke, if you're doing it at a fundraiser versus if you're doing it at a comedy club, and if you're doing it on a weekend show, there'll be a slight difference in the delivery from a Sunday night to a late show on Friday.
Yes. Yeah.
And similarly, if you're performing at different shows, whatever it is, if it's an outside show that's put together with a megaphone on the street in the middle of a festival, which I'm not a fan of, doing that kind of a thing. I mean, I like at a certain point when those things are look, I'd like to find good stage time, and I find even a free show and an open mic can will have a lot of value, but sometimes the parameters are such on a show that you're wondering, is this really about putting together a show, or is this about placating someone's ego and saying, well, we had a show, or we got to perform? Yeah, but what for? You performed to a bunch of drunks who were passing by who couldn't give a shit while you were performing. So really, who benefited from this whole thing? What was the point of doing this? Maybe it was fun. Maybe it was an experiment. Maybe it was educational. Although if it's educational, I find generally what you learn is to never do that again.
All right. I have a quick question, but I just want to interject this right now. Normally, I ask people if they could donate to support this channel, but at this time, I'm just going to ask that you donate in the name of George Floyd to Black Lives Matter group. Find a way in your own community to support the protests that are going on right now. Please. Okay, Peter. So to kind of extrapolate on what you were saying, because you work it until you have it good. Now, do you have a set time before you bank a joke so you can start working on new ones in the open mics?
No, no, not really, because I think everyone is a case by case basis. I mean, there was, a simple little joke that I did twice at an open mic, and both times it got a nice reaction. A silly reaction, but I, right away I was like, based on the reaction I got on the 2 times, I knew, yeah, this is already weekend ready. And then there's other things that I've took me 6 years to flesh out at an open mic because I'd keep going back to it and abandoning it because I just wasn't happy with it. So there isn't a set time at all. Now, could be 2 weeks, it could be could be 6 years.
Now you also got to experience New York. You were there for 10 months. Is that correct?
No, 2 months.
It's 2 months?
Yeah.
I suppose you did 10 months worth of Montreal shows in 2 months.
Pretty much. Yeah, I would say, about that. I would say the equivalent of that easily. I got on stage 137 times in 2 months. Good, bad, and ugly. And I got to hang out a lot with Stevie Spinola, who's a lot of fun to hang out with. He's a character, but he's a fun character to hang out with.
Yeah.
Got to really, I took a few days to also, see the city and really get to know the city. And met some really, really fun people. Met some really wonderfully talented people. Yeah, it was. I'm glad I did it, and I'd love to be able to do it again at some point. Obviously, with everything that's going on right now, it's going to be a long time before that happens again. But it was interesting. Was the people that were there? You had sort of 3 categories of people performing there. You had people who grew up in the area, and that's all the way from like New Jersey and even Connecticut, who would come in to perform and had relocated to New York or lived close by and would commute to perform. And then you had people who had been performing for a while in another city and then relocated there. They decided, that wherever they started, if it was Dallas or Omaha or whatever, just wasn't big enough. And so they needed to go to New York. And then you had people who started in New York. So, they might be from some little shit kicker town somewhere, or even a moderately sized city like, Dayton or Cleveland or something that may have had a comedy scene, but they decided, no, I'm going to start in New York. And so they would pick up and go there. And I found them to be kind of fascinating because, well, you could have done this there, but they just felt, no, I need to do this in New York. If I want to be a comedian, I have to go to New York. and I don't know if any of them necessarily had the advantage over the other. I think, uh, but like I said, it was just that last category was the most mind blowing because I didn't think there'd be that many people who would do that. There was a surprisingly large number of people like that.
It's sort of like people saying, I think I want to run track and field, but I want to do it at the Olympics first. Uh,
Exactly. Yeah.
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 Epic Armando has just jumped in to say that they owe you some balloon paintings. I'll leave that for you to work out with them in the future. Epic One, if you
Okay.
remember, used to do live
Of course. Of
paintings.
course.
Yeah.
Yes. I've got one of Epic's paintings in my living room. Shout out to Epic for doing. Yeah. Well, I'll let you finish what you were saying about the live paintings.
Yeah, I have one in my living room as well. I know something happened, and they lost a good number of the paintings that they had in storage, and so if anyone has a chance, they can to support Epic with their artwork. Please do so. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can actually connect with them there. Okay.
Mm.
So yeah, again, the analogy of trying track and field at the Olympics first.
With weights around the ankles. you know, like why are you doing this to yourself? But I mean, it was quite something. For one thing, you never saw the same. Well, you saw a lot of the same faces, but you could go an entire week and every show see three or four people, if not more, that you hadn't seen before. And then you tended to find a certain comfort, a certain routine with certain rooms that you enjoyed more than others. Um, who else was there at the time? Molly Brisbois was there at the time too. Very very funny performer who comedian who has lived in Toronto, has lived in the outskirts of Toronto, and I think
Um,
lives in Boston right now. She's half American,
yeah,
half Canadian, so but very very funny, very unique voice in comedy, and she was living there at the time as well. So we got to work together quite a bit, and that was fun. And like I said, Stevie's always a character. Um, just yeah, a lot of fun. Yeah,
yeah.
that
He
particular
played
thing was
drums
making
for
me
my.
really sorry.
He played drums at the old Kick-Ash open mic when we had the live band with it
Oh,
and
that's
stuff.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I hope you're all right, Stevie. Hope you're doing okay.
And if you're here, just drop a note in the comments. We'll try to flash it up for Peter and for everybody. Uh, Again, if you are watching on YouTube, please make sure you subscribe, ring the bell so you know about the different content. I'm just going to mention what I have coming up a little later this week, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Scott Vroman, who is one of the writers for Patriot Act and also a producer and writer for Will Arnett's new show, Memory Hole, which is available only in Canada, is going to be on. So Scott Vroman, he's also one of the founding members of Picnic Face and was on the Picnic Face TV show as well. So kind of excited. That's going to be 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday. So Peter, what now? This is the part where we begin to lament about what's happening in the world. There's
Mhm.
the combination of things. First, with the pandemic and the lockdown, I know that gave you a chance to actually use the word pops, which I think is a great story. So if you get a chance, if you want to recount that, and but living with the quarantine and now with what's happened, let's start with the quarantine. How has that been
Yeah.
affecting?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's it's unfortunate that we don't get to see our friends, we don't get to go out there and make people laugh, we don't get to go out and do what we like to do the most. But obviously, this is this at the moment, this is what we need to do, and there is a new normal that's in place right now, and um, what I find kind of odd is that we're still not out yet, but I certainly do see less people wearing masks. It seems that people are being a little less cautious now. I think maybe a lot of people have hit an exasperation point where they're just, like, screw it, I've done enough, which is
And
unfortunate.
we are in one of the worst hit cities in North America.
Hmm.
So that's I know I don't know if that's still the case, but we were the seventh highest death toll of all the cities in the world.
Yeah.
So which is it's not good for our city, and the fact that people are letting exhaustion get to them to the fact that they don't want to stay safe. Now, you made a trip to the post office one time early on,
Yeah.
wearing your mask and your gear. Could
Yeah. I was, in March. And yeah, this is the story you were talking about before. I went out there, and I've tried to be as vigilant as cautious as possible. Maintaining the minimum 2 meter distance. Having gloves on, a mask, and abiding by whatever guidelines the store tells you. And get into this pharmacy slash post office to send something off, and this fella trails right behind me, slightly older, not elderly, like not old timey, like cane and beard, and get off my property, but certainly older than us, and a full head of white hair, and just
so,
kind of oblivious. I would say in their 60s, oblivious to the danger and oblivious to the idea of the social or physical distancing, as we call it now. And he gets just a little too close behind me. And what made it particularly infuriating was that, in my best to maintain the physical distancing, I was waiting diligently before I could enter a particular aisle because there was all this traffic. So, I'm sort of, just waiting at the end, letting people go through so I can get there. And this guy just doesn't have any sense. He gets right behind me. He gets pretty damn close. And at that point, I turned around, and I think it was part of it was just the aggravation, the frustration of the situation we're in. I looked at him, and I bellowed, 2 meters, pops, 2 meters. So I got to use the word pops in 2020, but which was fun. But but it was also just a kind of a necessary thing. And he did back away at that point, so I guess it worked. But again, it's like, we're not asking people that much. I mean, we are asking people to change everything, but once you adapt, it's like, that's just what we have to do. This is for everyone's greater good. It's for your own sake, and for the sake of the people that are important to you. But yes, I got to call them pops. Um, as far as old timey sounding cliches, the this goes full circle to when I was in New York. I got to be called Mister, which was fun. The context being that I became friends with the staff at a place called Otto Shrunkenhead, which is a wonderful club slash bar that has a stage. And I asked the one of the owners, Nell. I said, "Look, my trip is almost done. I'm looking for some other things to do during the daytime. What would be something I should do that is not touristy, but that you feel, that is a quintessential New York experience, whether it's touristy or not, but ideally not that touristy?" She said, "Well, it's going to sound touristy, but it is something that is a very New York thing to do. She said, you've got to go to Coney Island." So I went to Coney Island. I'd never been before, and I had a blast. And they have a range of skee ball machines, and I've always enjoyed skee ball. And I had a particularly good skee ball day, and I was racking up a fair number of tickets for all my plays. Now you take all these little tickets, and then you redeem them for whatever prize you want. There was nothing there that I wanted. And I didn't feel like schlepping around some prize. I see a father with his daughter, and she's got her head pressed up against the display case of all these like prizes that she's eyeing. And I asked the father, "Is this your daughter?" He says, "Yes." I said, "It looks like she really wants some of the prizes." He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Would it be all right if I give you the tickets for her?" And he said, "Yeah, that'd be wonderful." So I hand the tickets over, and I go, "Here, these are for you." And she looks at me, and she realizes, the value of what I've given her. And she actually goes, "Gee, thanks, mister." And, I mean, as far as a New York moment to hear, thanks, Mister. I can't say for sure now because it's been a few years if she said G, but she did say thanks, Mister. And just hearing that with a New York accent, I was like, yeah, that was part of the trip. That alone made the whole thing. Getting a thanks, Mister, was just part of it.
And now,
Getting to hear that.
now talking about New York moments that you did miss out on is you didn't get mugged while you were there.
No.
Can you relate the story of when you realized or why you didn't get mugged? Because there were some people who described how dangerous some of your activities were.
Oh, well, I think I know what you mean now. Yeah, this is the neighborhood I stayed in was at the end of Manhattan. It's an area called Inwood. And at night, because of the subway train, it was faster to commute to the Bronx and then take a bus from the Bronx across a bridge to get to Inwood. It was just easier. And this would be at 1 or 2 in the morning. And so I'd be riding the subway and then waiting at a bus stop at 2 in the morning. This round, short, pasty guy that I am, waiting for a bus. But one of the things that I did was I also had a cheapo phone with me. I had a flip phone, a piece of crap flip phone, and I made a point of carrying it in my hand. I just thought if I'm holding my payphone, people will assume I don't have that much money. So, if there is any threat of violence, I'm less likely to get attacked if they just see that. And then a couple of locals, when I was telling this, they said, no, they probably left you alone because someone your height and your weight carrying a phone like that, they're going to assume you're a drug dealer and that you're carrying a gun. And that's probably why people didn't mess with you. And it was like, now, whether or not that's true, I don't know, but it seems feasible. It makes for a fun story. So,
giving off a little bit of accidental Bernard Goetz vibes.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good reference for the two people out there who remember Bernard Goetz. Do you remember? What was his name? Bobcat Goldthwait's joke on him.
No. Yeah, I can hear him talking about it, but I don't remember the joke.
Yeah. So for those people who aren't going to look it up, Bernard Goetz was a guy who in the early 80s, and this is before New York really cleaned up still, when New York was the dangerous city that it isn't now, but for a while, mid 70s on to the early 80s, there was less of a budget. The subways were a dangerous place to be, especially late at night. 4 young people approached Bernard Goetz, and they were holding screwdrivers. And they asked him if he had any money. He had a gun, and he reacted Charles Bronson vigilante style and shot them. I don't believe any of them were killed, but they were certainly hospitalized. And it created a whole amount of fear in the subway and before he was caught. Anyway, Bobcat Goldthwait's joke was, how do you threaten someone with a screwdriver? What did they say to him? Give us your money or we're going to make your glasses really, really wobbly.
Right.
That's the joke.
Yeah. I believe there were deaths involved, and it was also kind of hinted that he had, or it came out in the trial that he sort of was looking for the trouble. So he was definitely inspired by Death Wish, the movie, the Charles Bronson movie. Yeah.
I actually should go back and read up about that because to be honest, I haven't read anything about it since it happened.
My memory could be faulty, but that was kind of that's how I remember it at this time. Now you handle the development nights at the in association with Sean. Why am I blanking on names?
Stenhouse.
Yeah, Sean Stenhouse. Run the development nights for the Comedy Nest here in Montreal. What do you think about reopening, and also The fact that Ricky Bronson has opened up the comic strip in Edmonton, though he's only at 25% capacity. What do you think is going to happen here in Montreal?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I can tell you that before the club was, they were, they followed the law. Let me try this again. On March 15th, the provincial government issued an edict that basically all entertainment venues had to shut down. Before that, they had a prior edict that any venue that could hold more than 250 people had to shut down. 250 or less was, you could stay open. The club's capacity is 170. David, being a very, very thoughtful individual, and a very concerned individual about well-being, even though the club was allowed to operate at full capacity, he and Phil, the other owner of the club, made the decision on their own to restrict the access of the club from 170 to about 90 people. I think maybe 100 at the most.
I think they said 50% is what they said. So that would have been.
Yeah. I mean, it was a couple months ago, but I know that they did restrict the attendance. They had already taken some precautions before the 15th to limit the number of people coming in. They didn't want to have the club full. And it did result in, for the last week and a half or so that the club was operating before it was closed, turning away a lot of people. The club is traditionally sold out every weekend, every Friday and Saturday, both shows. And despite the restrictions, they still had people showing up at the door wanting to get in. And of course, we're sent away and said, yes, we want your money. We'd love to have you in, but this is more important, public safety. I know that the club is eager to reopen. I've spoken to David a couple times since the pandemic has started. The club is eager to reopen, and it wants to reopen, and it will reopen when everything is ready to and when they can. I imagine that they will operate in a similar fashion, restricting the number of people attending. So they won't be open to 170 people when they reopen. They'll probably do something similar to what Rick Bronson's doing with his club, and limit the attendance to a smaller number for the sake of the safety of the audience, and also you want people to not be stressed at a comedy show, right? And if you have an audience that shows up and yes, they're there to laugh, and now they're a little antsy or stressed out because people are too close to them, well, that takes away the whole point of being at a show. So when they open is going to be as soon as they're allowed to open. They will open. I know that they have been working on some steps to increase the safety of the patrons while the club has been closed. They had already started some of this before the club shut. Before they were told to, they already had given the staff all gloves. They had hand sanitizers at the entrance. There was a bunch of other things that were done in terms of the turnover of the club between shows, cleaning the entire club. I mean that's something they always did anyway. They would wipe down the tables. They were doing this, now, but with, I guess, a more industrial grade cleanser. But there is certainly the eagerness to reopen the club. But it's, I'm confident it's going to be done when they can, but as long as they can also do it with the public safety in mind, to make sure that everyone is okay and everyone that goes to the show has a positive experience. But that could be in a month, that could be in 3 weeks, that could be in 2 months. I know that the government has hinted at venues starting to open around the 22nd or so. I think, what was it they were saying? I think if you serve food, you can open on the 22nd. And the club does serve food, so they may qualify under that. I'm sure they're looking into it as we speak.
I know in other provinces, I'm not as familiar with the liquor rules in Quebec, but I know in other provinces you get there's different grades of license. So a restaurant license, liquor license, is
Mhm.
different than a bar liquor license, and a show venue
Yeah,
license can be different than both of those. So it all really depends
I
on what
think
your
Quebec
license is.
has, yes, indeed. I think Quebec
Yeah,
has at least 8 or 9 different liquor licenses that are available. Um, Including, as you were mentioning, there's the show bar licenses, and then there's show bar licenses that exclude or include nudity.
yeah,
So that allows a venue, like the one that you work at regularly at the Wiggle Room, to have those kinds of shows, which would be illegal at the Comedy Nest, even though they may have a similar type of license.
to be
Um,
clear, the Wiggle Room doesn't have a license that allows nudity.
no,
So
no, no.
that's yeah, but it does allow going to pasties and G strings, a burlesque license.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, but there's
uh,
different levels of that, is what I'm
yeah,
told. It's not at all the same as the a strip club license. By all means, that's not at
yeah,
all what I was trying to say. It is a very different, certainly a more sophisticated type of show. But my point was simply that even within the permutations of show licenses, there are different levels
yeah.
that allow different things. So it'll be interesting to see. I'd be surprised if even some of the people who have the licenses will know if they can open up yet, uh, given this province's history of making things as confusing as possible for business owners. So that'll be kind of fun to watch and find out, who is able to open and who isn't. Um,
So,
um,
but before
yeah.
we jump onto more current events, I also just quickly, you had a little bit of a health issue right at the beginning of this, of the lockdown, uh, which involved you going for medication and going to the doctor. Uh, how was your experience doing that
Oh, the kidney
during COVID?
stone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the kidney stone. I mean, that was remarkable, actually. I was obviously very reluctant to go to the hospital during these times, but it's the same hospital I'd been to for previous kidney stones. And what was remarkable was one, how safe everything was. They only let you in as a patient, so no friends, no guests, no family, nothing like that. You got to go in on your own.
No support.
They triage you right away, and I was actually on a hospital bed being looked after within 10 minutes of getting there. And in another 10 minutes, I was already on a drip of Dilaudid. Um,
You're a
all
fan.
within 20. Oh yes, it's lovely. All within 20 minutes, I was on Dilaudid, and the I noticed that the staff was. I mean, the way it worked was you had the medical professionals, the doctors, the nurses, and they would focus on you. And while they were
Mhm.
talking to you, uh, they gave you all their time, and they took care of you. They did everything they needed to, and then when they were done, you'd see them. They would start to peel off their gloves, go back to the center island, get new gloves, and then go deal with another patient. And this is how they worked. So focus attention on one patient, then go deal with another patient. And I was out by noon, and I was actually picking up my medication um, by about 12:15 at a pharmacy around the corner. So I think what's happened is probably because of COVID. I think a lot of people were afraid to go to the hospital unless they absolutely need to. So if you stubbed your toe or something, you probably didn't go this time. And the people that were there went and were given the care they needed and were out in a very quick time. So yeah, I mean, I've never had a complaint about the health services in this province. I've any complaints I have are about how it's underfunded, and the blood is still on Parizeau's hands for doing that years ago. Former premier of this province who made all the cuts, and unfortunately, it's never been really addressed. we certainly need more hospitals in the province. We certainly need more care. The doctors and nurses are grossly overworked and underpaid for what they do. But the service you get has always been, for me, very satisfactory. They took great care of my father in his final years. I can't say anything disparaging about them other than I wish they were given a little more respect and a little more better resources. A little more money, a little more vacation time, a chance to do an 8-hour shift instead of a 16-hour shift or a 20-hour shift that you hear about sometimes. But yeah, if you need to go. They will take care of you. So
On top
and
of
yeah,
on top of all this, on top of living with COVID and the fact that our frontline medical people are doing an amazing job, the news came out from Minnesota. The video came out of George Floyd, just piled on top of all the other abuses that police have put upon people of color in the States, and the protests began to start. What's your thoughts on like that aspect of the current state of the world, like in combination with COVID?
well, I mean, it certainly has made social distancing a lot more difficult if you can go out there in March. Um, that's all out the window. But I mean, there's really nothing that can be said other than it's terrible as to what's going on right now. It's terrible that it got to this. It feels like what's going on right now, I imagine, is the reaction that's taking place right now is a reaction to George Floyd, but it's a reaction to a cumulative effect. This is not the first time it happened, and it probably won't be the last time, unfortunately. And I think, the best statement I've seen has summed it up, that this goes back to 1619. And every time something happens, it just amplifies the anger. So of course, people are out there in the streets. I mean, how could they not be? How could people not be upset? How could people not be frustrated and want justice? You know, and I mean, really, it's just about being treated equally. That's all this is about. It's about not allowing this to continue. Um, it's it's heartbreaking for the family. I imagine that George Floyd did not want to be a martyr. I think he'd have rather just been who he was and continued. Um, but
We cannot
and
we cannot
sorry.
deny the effect. I mean, for example, the charges against the police officer Govin was went from being a third degree manslaughter to second degree murder, and the three other police present went from being suspended to being fired to being charged as accessories. And then the
Yeah,
Breonna Taylor case has now been reopened and to be
mm,
investigated. So there there has been an effect on this, and it's in our province of Quebec where the premier has said that there is no systemic racism. Um,
yeah.
yeah, is
Well, it's hard to take seriously the words of someone who um, has demonstrated a lot of intolerance himself. So I'm not sure that he's exactly the right gauge on this kind of stuff. When you look at what his policies were towards government workers about not allowing them to, you know, to wear religious symbols. This
except
is
for
someone
crosses.
who's right. This is someone whose policies have spoken of intolerance and systematic racism. So it might be a little difficult for him to spot it.
Yeah.
Um, you know, you're not as likely to notice the bigotry if you're a bigot. So yeah, quite frankly, I don't think I would take what he has to say seriously. Um, I mean, I'm lucky in that I, you know, I mean, I appreciate my privilege. I had a friend in CEGEP, who uh, whose father was a teacher at the CJEP, and they had a decent above average car, and he didn't live that far from me. Um, you can probably guess that he was a young man of color, and still is, of course. He was kind enough to offer me a lift home one day in his car. And at the time, I had hair down to my shoulders. Um, David, on the other hand, was always impeccably dressed and short cropped hair, very academic looking. We leave the CSHEP campus, and about 3 blocks away, a police car pulled us over. And what I remember about it was that David mechanically went toward the glove compartment, and there was his license and registration. And by the time the cop showed up at the police door at the window, he was holding them and handing them, ready to hand them to the police officer. And I had never experienced anything like this, of course. Why would I, right? And there was nothing wrong. It was just, he just wanted to know whose car it was. And when he explained it was his father's car, he was asked, "Does your father know you have the car?" Yes. You can of course check with him if you need to. Here's his. He should be home now if you want. If you want to make a call or whatever. Anyway, once the police left, I was shocked, and David just said, "Well, this is not the first time it happened, and it's not the last time." I was annoyed, but I was too naive at the time to realize, well, this is just a normal thing, unfortunately, that a lot of people experience. Or for them, it's normal. It's not right, but this is something that I actually, normal isn't the right word, because there's nothing normal about it. It's something they're used to or expect, unfortunately, because of the systematic kind of racism. Around that same time, I was pulled over with another friend who also had hair down to his shoulder. This was a friend whose father, this is relevant, his father had passed away, and my friend took his inheritance and invested in the stock market. He did well enough that he bought himself a Porsche. We were at a Canadian Tire. We left a Canadian Tire with my friend holding a screwdriver. We get into the car. We're driving. We got pulled over by the cops. This friend was white. We got pulled over by the cops a few minutes later, and they wanted to see the registration. They said, "Well, we're sorry to bother you, but some people saw you getting into the car with a screwdriver, and we just thought, we should check." And my friend laughed, and he said, "No, I got the screwdriver right here. I have the receipt for it too. Do you want to see?" And the cops laughed and said, "Sorry to bother you and have a nice day," and everything like that. I don't remember the cops saying "sorry to bother you" when they were talking to David. I don't remember them saying, "have a nice day." I just remember them asking a lot of questions to him, giving him the third degree for using a car that they didn't think he should be in. That's what I remember. But I remember with my other friend, it was all a big laugh. "Oh, we saw you in a luxury car, and sorry to bother you, and take it easy." And all laughs, and what a silly moment this was.
David Pride had recently revisited one of his fond stories of university life in a new light in a blog post. So I do recommend people check out David Pride on Facebook, because it was sort of like a wake up moment for him. Not that he was unaware, but it was like it really sort of drove home these type of instances. Now, on a bit of a lighter note, you during COVID, you've adapted your life to the lockdown, etc. Is there anything that you're doing during lockdown that you think that you will continue once these restrictions are lifted?
Well, you mean from a comedic point of view, or just from a lifestyle point of view?
Lifestyle and comedic as well. It's They Talk Funny. We're supposed to be at least touching about comedy.
I mean, we've got Amazon Prime, we've got Shudder, we've got Criterion, um, Netflix, of course, and Crave. I think what will continue is we'll probably use a few of those services, but not all of them. Um, I've been playing a lot more guitar lately. I just find it really enjoyable and therapeutic.
You
And
gonna be a musical comedic act?
no, absolutely not. I
Okay.
know my limitations. Yeah,
Uh,
no, I know my limitations, and I know better than to bring the damn thing on stage.
Ben
No one
Cardilli.
needs to hear me play.
No, Ben Cardilli's been killing it. I would give him a pass if he wanted to do more comedic music.
I I think it would be wonderful, and I think he should be encouraged to do that because Ben can actually sing. Ben is an actual musician. That's fine. We've had some lovely chats about guitar, he and I, but no, I know my limitations. I'm eager to go out there. I'm eager to perform, but I'm also eager to just go out for walks again as much as possible. I'm eager to uh, you know return to the old normal from the new normal. So I can't think of too many things I'm doing right now that I'll maintain. Um,
I know that for deliveries you had sort of set up a basket off your balcony.
oh yeah, I have because I live on an upper floor in my building. I have it's actually one of the recycling shopping bags attached to a long cord. And what I've done is I've lowered it off the balcony, and then a delivery can be placed in it, and then I can reel it back up, much to the amusement of the person making the delivery. And it probably gives them something to talk about when they get home or something. I don't know. I'd like to not have to do that. If I was really dedicated, what I would have done is maybe bought a bunch of wigs online and then give myself like a Rapunzel thing and then lower that and see what the reaction is. Should have done that. There's an idea for someone. Yeah, take it. Get a bunch of wigs, braid them together, and then attach a basket to the end and drop that and see that. Watch Just for Laughs Gags do that next year. That I'm calling it.
You're calling it. All right.
Yeah, they're doing that. What about yourself? What kind of changes are you going to keep doing from this?
I'm not sure. I am missing the outside quite a bit. I live with a person who's immunosuppressed, so though as much as I would love to be adding my voices to the protests and the march, it's the choice of immediately risking their life. It's a hard thing to balance that out. Elsbeth Wright says you still have time to do your Rapunzel act.
You know what? I challenge Elspeth to do it.
Actually, I think she should get Madeline to do it. Her roommate Madeline, the mannequin.
Yes. Yeah. I just figure for anyone who knows Elspeth, she has very, very short cropped hair. At least the last time I saw her, she did. So I think it would be a more interesting. Yes, go for it, Elspeth. Do it.
Elspeth, that's our challenge to you. All right. So at this point in time, normally I schedule 30 to 40 minutes for this, and we've just hit an hour and 13. We're about to hit hour and 15.
Why?
Elsbeth is also saying done. She's taking the challenge. Since that worked out so well, I want to challenge everybody who's watching. Please hit the subscribe button. I only have about 145 subscribers here on YouTube, and it would be nice to get up over 200 before the end of the month. So if you can do that, if you can share this video with your friends or share the channel, because I'm trying to put out at least 4 videos a week of original content. I definitely want to be thanking my guest today, Peter Radomski. Peter, do you have anything that you want to plug? I know we've mentioned your video that was recorded pre-lockdown.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Are you?
There was also one I shot during the lockdown, which I put up online on my YouTube channel.
Oh yes, about all the friends. And again,
yes,
Theo,
it's called My Pals. Yeah.
That's also on Vimeo.
No, that's just on my YouTube channel. You can search for it for My Pals, a COVID-19 story. I used Theo as the lead in it because I don't like how I appear on camera. So I thought it would be better if he did it instead. And there's a couple of other things that I'm trying to put together for that. I think the key is to write things with the second wave in mind when that hits.
Yeah.
To be really cynical and pessimistic about things. No, I would say that the only thing I'd really plug at this point was I would say to everyone as well to please do something, do whatever you can in the name of George Floyd. If it's donate, or if it's to write to whatever government constituent that you have a rapport with about demanding some reform, some changes, some accountability. Um, you know, I will say I think it's commendable that Prime Minister Trudeau has addressed the issue by acknowledging that Canada isn't perfect. Not brushing it off and saying, well, that's an American problem, but addressing that there needs to be some changes in Canada too. That we're far from perfect here, and that we should focus on our own backyard as well. It's all fine and well, and we certainly should show them that the world is watching right now what's going on over there. But I think it would also be helpful if at the same time we try to do something over here and try and get a little more accountability. You know, make sure that maybe it's body cams, and make sure that the cameras don't stop filming. Address the kind of training that takes place, but make it less of an issue, and certainly make try and get to a place where people shouldn't be in fear of contacting the authorities or having the authorities show up.
Yep.
So yeah, that would be my plug. Take a moment right now and try and do something. If it's if you can donate, either donate your time or write those letters or donate some money. But there's a lot of good causes. There's the NAACP. There's Black Lives Matter. There's we have organizations in Canada that need attention as well.
Also bail funds.
There's also
the bail
yeah,
funds for protesters.
funds.
Pretty much every major city has one. So if you're a
Yeah, I
lawyer,
think it's also worth noting. I was going to say it's worth noting in Canada that here there's also a plight of how the Indigenous are treated by authorities consistently, and that is something that we shouldn't forget. That's what our big crime here is how we continue to mistreat the Indigenous now with the authorities, and let's not forget about them right now too. They certainly need attention, and their cause is worth listening to. So maybe keep our ears open for them.
all right. I want to thank you, Peter, for joining me today. And just a rundown of what's going to be happening on the YouTube channel for the week is tomorrow. The Love Doctor live stream is going to happen with he's having on a Big Daddy, Christina Summer, and also burlesque performer Miss Enchante will be sharing the screen with him. Thursday is going to be the interview with Scott Vroman, one of the writers from Patriot Act with San Minaj. And we have on Friday is going to be BattleCom at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's the Geek War of comedy game shows. So that's the rest of this week. Oh no, we've got a bonus episode this Saturday, a bonus episode of They Talk Funny with Chris Sandiford. So please.
Oh, he's so much fun.
He is.
Did you see him in What We Do in the Shadows?
I have not yet. I should watch that before I get to see him. Did you watch him in Cavendish? Here he is. He's a Montreal guy. He's all over the place, and he is such a delightful performer. He's also did BattleCom, the first episode. So we're coming up on the first. Whoa! Here's a name. The best host at Grumpy's coming from Faisal Butt. Just wanted to say
he's talking about himself right there.
Yeah.
That would be my vote. But hey, Faze, it's nice to see that. What's it called? Yeah, Sandiford also, I think it's worth noting. Chris is also one of the genuinely kindest souls you could ever have the pleasure of meeting and working with on the scene. It's nice to see the success he's achieved, and
Deservedly so.
and in spite of that too, I would say everyone should be watching What We Do in the Shadows because it's such a wonderfully funny show. For those who don't know, the premise is it's kind of like a reality type show, Big Brother type thing, where you have the documentary type crew that interviews the people who live together. They just happen to be vampires. That's the twist.
Oh, I thought he
So
was the sequel was dealing more with the werewolves.
no, 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 no. It's still vampires, but this time they're on Staten Island, and they live together, and most of them are blood sucking vampires, although one of them is an energy vampire. And anyway, Chris has a small part in a couple of episodes, but it was delightful to see him in that. The show was actually filmed in Toronto, although it takes place in
New
Staten
York.
Island.
Yeah, Staten
Yeah,
Island.
worth watching. It's a damn funny show. Richard Berry is in it. It's a very, very funny show. So just that alone, watch the damn thing. But watch it also because Chris Sandiford is in it, and he's a swell guy. So,
all right. Thank you again for coming on the show. I'm here with Peter J. Radomski. My name is Paul Ash. This has been They Talk Funny, and it's been an absolute pleasure sharing this time with you. So everyone, take care, and we'll see you guys in the coming weeks.
Thanks for having me.